Easy forward, prepare to take the load.
An Alaskan Coast Guard crew saves 4 fishermen from an icy death.
His legs aren't working. He's just too cold.
18 and a half, been flying this thing.
Commander Mark Visley pilots dozens of these rescue missions each year.
People get injured and hurt, and we have to come in and take them out of harm's way.
Do you see the ocean as a dangerous place?
Oh, of course, if you're not prepared.
In the small coastal town of Sitka, commercial fishing has long been the greatest source of income.
Brian W. Kreider.
And a leading cause of death.
For those in peril on the sea.
Fishing fatalities have dropped significantly since Congress passed the law governing fishing safety in 1988. But Alaska's fishing industry, worth more than $6 billion a year, has still lost more than 400 fishermen since then.
I had known a lot of people that had died in fishing because they didn't have a piece of equipment or they didn't know how to use it.
Let me see.
Just for practice, try putting that saddle on the hard pipe.
Jerry Zugan used to fish for a living, but today he teaches other fishermen how to stay safe when they're out at sea.
Take your caps and hoods off before you put the hood on.
In Alaska, that means learning how to get into an immersion suit to survive the icy waters.
I got you.
But the Coast Guard here currently lacks the resources and the authority to ensure that every fishing vessel carries these life-saving suits.
We want to get you out of the water.
Right now, the enforcement is just they catch people as they can on the water, and that's it. So it's kind of a cherry-picking thing.
Ed Mertz once lost 3 fellow crew members at sea and says the training available in Sitka should be mandatory for all fishermen.
A lot of people figure they're invincible, you know how that is. It's like that in everything. But there's people that it couldn't happen to me type deal.
Those tasked with responding to whatever does happen at sea,
One basket without trail line underway.
like Commander Mark Visley,
Target sight.
say they welcome any effort to reduce risk among the fishing fleet.
Halfway down.
If we never get launched out, that's just great, because I don't want anybody to get in trouble out there, and I don't want anybody to lose their life. And what they do is an extremely dangerous livelihood.
According to the most recently released federal statistics, commercial fishing remains the deadliest profession in the United States.
As an entrepreneur, you constantly look for holes in the market. It was transparently obvious that nobody was building a global sports brand for innovation in accessories. There's personal care, there's grip, there's cooling, there's heating. The big boys, Nike and Under Armour, Adidas, weren't paying attention to accessories. So the initial vision was, let's bring on the world's greatest athletes as equity owners. First athlete I signed was Alonzo Mourning and the Miami Heat. From there, I went on to sign Mia Hamm, Steve Nash, Sergio Garcia, David Wright, Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony, Serena Williams. They're not just getting equity in lieu of cash, they're truly part of the development process in the business. We chose to start in the personal care category. The ability to compete in that space with the larger corporations in the market was challenging. About a year and a half in, we moved into acquisition mode and we acquired a host of intellectual property in the grip space. We launched that in 2011. We then followed that with the acquisition of cooling technologies, which has completely changed the fabric of the company. We launched the towel technology in 2012. It's a proprietary fiber and textile that when water and air combine on the textile, it cools instantly to 58 degrees. And the product line took off. The launch of a product became the expansion into a portfolio that has now built into a full category. Mission is poised to be the leader of thermoregulation, which in a nutshell is controlling the temperature of athletes to enhance performance and recovery. You have to balance the need to fund the business while preserving the brand. We were approached by 2 incredibly large retailers who waved a sizable multi-million-dollar purchase order in front of my face. As hard as that was when we needed capital, it was the wrong answer for the brand, and so we declined those POs. In hindsight, it was probably one of the best decisions we've made as a brand because it protected our position in the market. Today, as a company and as a brand, our goal is to continue dominating thermoregulation. We've experienced 10x growth in the last 5 years. I can confidently say we're on track for $1 billion. And I believe the global implications for mission are far beyond $1 billion.
It's the national pastime in a nation that feels stuck in the past. On this field in Havana, kids dream about a future that's often centered on their country's most famous team, Industriales, the New York Yankees of Cuba. Ticket prices may be lower here than at Yankee Stadium,
Gracias.
but the fans can compete when it comes to passion, and some players can compete when it comes to talent.
They want to show how good they are and play baseball at a higher level. That's the first reason, I think. The other reasons are financial.
Industriales manager Lazaro Vargas understands all too well why many players here, including his 15-year-old son Antonio, might want to play in the US. But government attempts to keep these players in Cuba have created an underground industry for human smuggling, and Major League Baseball's own rules have provided the financial incentives that fund it.
It's nothing more than stealing talent from Cuban baseball. And I believe that we are spending tons of money on these young players. And then the traffickers are taking them to the United States to play baseball.
But the precise details of this perilous passage to America often remain shrouded in secrecy.
The Cuban baseball players don't talk. The smugglers obviously aren't talking. The agents who are negotiating their contracts aren't talking.
Paul Minoff is a Florida attorney who's represented Leonis Martin, a Cuban center fielder who, to boost his signing value with the Texas Rangers, traveled to the US via Mexico. That's because Cuban nationals, to qualify as international free agents that can sign these huge contracts, must first establish residency in a third country.
These are the golden geese. These are the guys that are going to bring them significant amounts of money. Just because you get out of Cuba doesn't guarantee that you will ever, A, make your way into America, and B, make your way into a Major League Baseball team.
But high-profile Cuban signings like these players who do make it to a Major League team are often on the hook to pay off the smugglers that help them get there.
Leonis Martin paid his smugglers $1,350,000. It's a big number, it's a lot of money.
And when it comes to money, teams like Industriales can hardly compete. Their best young player is Lourdes Jr., a 21-year-old second baseman whom experts told us could be worth as much as $80 or $90 million if he ever signed as a free agent to a major league team. His current base salary is less than $38 a month.
When one of your friends leaves to go and play in America, what do you think about that?
If someone is encouraged to play in the best league, and it's no secret that it's the US, you always encourage a friend, because ultimately they are a friend and you wish them the best.
In a state-controlled sport, both the players who leave and the smugglers who assist them are equally considered enemies of the revolution. And even as the two countries slowly inch closer, a vast gulf remains between a multi-billion-dollar business and this island's national sport.
To get to the top of One World Trade Center to the 102nd floor takes 47 seconds.
Welcome to One World Observatory.
This is the fourth tallest building in the world, but the tallest buildings don't necessarily have the tallest observatories. This one isn't even among the top 10. At 2,716 feet tall, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai is the world's tallest building, but its observatory is almost 1,000 feet lower than that. When the Shanghai Tower opens later this year, it will be the second tallest building in the world, but it'll have the tallest observation deck. Skyscrapers compete for visitors, and tickets are not cheap. To see the outdoor observatory at the Burj Khalifa, for instance, costs $136.13. And tickets aren't the only source of revenue. At the top, there are lounges and boutiques.
Here at One World Trade, there's a bar, a cafe, and a steakhouse.
The observatory's operator expects to earn $875 million for the owning partnership over the next 15 years. This will be the third big observation deck in New York. The other two are Top of the Rock at Rockefeller Center and the Empire State Building. 7 million tourists visit New York's observatories every year, but in the next few years, it's estimated that number could grow to 9 million. And One World Observatory expects to see 3 to 4 million of those visitors every year.
In the Canadian province of Alberta's remote woodlands, Colton Briggs is preparing for battle. He works as a forest health officer. But recently he's been finding more and more unhealthy trees.
Is it fair to call this a war?
Some days the planning going into it looks a lot like battlefield planning.
There's a couple here, actually.
Yeah,
His enemy is tiny.
It's in its pupal stage now, actually.
A mountain pine beetle that burrows into the bark of certain coniferous trees.
In large numbers, the beetle's able to take out, to kill all mountainsides of pine within several years.
From the air, dead and dying pines appear as red and orange flecks. Timber means big business in Alberta, but in neighbouring British Columbia, it's the major industry. And the beetle's rapid spread, encouraged by several unusually warm winters, has so far killed 60% of the harvestable pine trees there.
It's one of the greatest natural disasters that has ever been seen, certainly ever been seen in British Columbia.
Roger Hutchinson is head of investor relations for West Fraser, one of 3 giant Canadian timber firms rooted in British Columbia, where lumber is the biggest single export product.
There's been more trees cut through the last 10 years than otherwise would have been. It's been a race to try to get the economic benefits out of the trees.
In the timber town of Quesnel, where West Fraser has its headquarters, that race to harvest threatened trees helped the company's sawmill expand into one of the world's largest. But local lumber production has fallen more than a quarter in the past decade as the supply of mature trees starts to run out.
It takes 60 to 80 years in British Columbia for a tree to be planted and to grow to become large enough to be a saw log.
Giant global commodity markets won't wait for a tiny beetle. And so, as sawmills in British Columbia close, big Canadian companies like West Fraser have been heading south of the border to buy up dozens of US operations.
Our dependency on West Fraser is very high.
Bob Simpson spent years working in timber and is now mayor of Quesnel.
They pay about 95% of our industrial tax rate. They are the largest employer in town by far. And if they start to shut their mills down, it will send a shiver through our community like we haven't experienced in the past.
Is there any unhappiness when people hear in a town like Quesnel about companies like West Fraser moving down to the US South?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's people in the community that feel like money that's been made in British Columbia, money that's been made off of a public resource, all ended up being invested in the United States.
Back in Alberta, where West Fraser has also expanded, forestry officials hope their efforts will stop the beetle's march and spare their timber industry from a similar fate.